falling below the poverty line. So that's where the video I've shown in some classes before called The Line. It's about 24,000 for a family of four, which nowadays is really hard to get by on. That's about $12 an hour for 40 hours a week all year. The new coronavirus relief bill, they're trying to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Have any of you guys heard that? Like your hometown or I don't know if they'll do it or not. So the challenging part about that, it's exciting because it's double that $7.50 it used to be. And then the challenging part is on the flip side, it could cause more inflation, like cause basic goods to rise and like how much things cost in general to raise up. Other parts of defining poverty is a person or family has less than others in society, or a person or family feels they do not have enough to get along. And this is why we started having policy push for different social workers' assistance in the first place. The urban farming guys actually made a pretty good video of what they're doing with poverty in Kansas City.
Phase 1. 3 years ago, that's the question. Can it be done? We posted a video with no plan, no money, just a seed in our pockets and a deep, burning vision. Can a band of pioneers move into the inner city, into one of the most blighted and crime-ridden zip codes in the U.S. and build a sustainable, thriving community from the inside out? Can we grow all of our own food? Can we grow 2,000 pounds of fish in the area the size of a living room? Can we generate all of our own energy? Can we create jobs from within the community? Can we make a difference in the next generation? Can we work together to see hope emerge from the urban rubble and hopelessness? Can it be done from the inside out? Can it be done by the outcast, the drug addict? Can it be done with those on parole? Can it be done by the children? So much has happened since then. Welcome to the Concrete Jungle. Inner city, Kansas City. Lycan's neighborhood. Ground zero. Place we call home. Place where hope thrives amidst hopelessness. 1 in 11 people will become victim of violent crime. Where every block has at least one house full of bullet holes. We're looking around and we look down and we find a bullet that has the rifle in the dust, the glass dust from the solar panel. A place where arson has burned down hundreds of homes, including 3 houses at the same time on our block one day this spring. Fire number 1. Fire number 2 on the other side over there. A place where more than 50% of kids don't graduate in the first 4 years. A place where kids roam the streets at midnight and metal scrappers roll down the street with the neighbor's air conditioners in their shopping carts. A place where men beat each other over who gets first run to the garbage dumpster. Where homes are purchased for $1 because people are too afraid to buy. A forgotten land, too far gone for community development firms and politicians to get behind. Yet a land full of hope for those who have eyes to see it.
I've seen a number of guys that have come into contact with UFG that have turned their life around.
6 months with urban farming guys has changed my life. I wouldn't be doing any of the stuff that I'm doing today without that.
Got my head butts open a couple times, got beat up, jumped, stabbed, various things.
I came here pretty messed up in the head and with nothing. And by the time I left, I now have my own house, a good vacuum system for staying clean.
Like, I remember getting high and praying to God to get me up off of this stuff because it's destroying my life. I remember crying out to him and crying out. And then at the same time, I had to make a decision.
I ended up here because I was running around city being stupid and ended up getting booted out of my aunt's house and started living on the street.
And it's like UFG introduces love to a lot of people that haven't felt it and haven't seen it, to a community in a whole.
In the last 3 years, mountains have moved. We have seen urban lots transformed into beautiful community gardens. Over 20 lots so far. And in the last year, we just purchased 18 more. Vacant lots that were completely destroyed are now becoming thriving centers of community and growth. Community coming together. Hope beginning to rise. Next, we're creating our own energy. Last month, the electricity bill for our base was $3. Then we attached gutters to the solar panels and built a massive rain catchment system to harvest over 45,000 gallons of clean rainwater each year to irrigate the community gardens. Our internship is rapidly expanding, and just as we were running out of space, 2 months ago someone offered to sell us the house across the street for $1. So after spending one of our last few dollars, another person called and gave us $25,000 to begin to fix it up and expand our programs. And we got to work. This house is flying together. This summer, not having any idea this would all fall in place, we picked up the acre of land behind the house for pennies and began to get it ready for some serious urban agriculture. We're gearing up to install this 150-foot-long greenhouse we just found for 10% of its value. We believe that a sustainable community needs to have its own thriving economy, and this is what we're doing about it. We're raising up future growers through our apprenticeship program. We're creating economic opportunities. We're now shipping baby fish all over the country. We're creating micro businesses for people to run. Tyrone, who runs our worm farm and is right here from Lincoln's neighborhood, is getting ready to launch our latest product, Worm Castings, nature's best soil conditioner. And when we're not hard at work teaching hands-on entrepreneurial skills in the neighborhood, our team is gradually learning all kinds of skilled trades from sheetrock to carpentry and plumbing as we renovate 2 houses that we purchased this year for under $1,500.
I mean, what, to chopping wood, to construction, to build, teaching us plumbing on houses. It's a wonderful thing, and I just see them all doing that at once, man, and just helping everybody out.
And to top this off, the crime stats keep going down. 62 less violent crimes this year in our 5-block radius, and a total of 18% drop since we began. And lastly, our after-school art program for the kids in Lycos neighborhood is still going strong. Not only can it be done, but it's being done by the very hand of those who used to destroy it. Our greatest partners in this work are right from the block. To turn this whole thing on its head, our team now has more good being done by ex-convicts and drug addicts than what we could have ever done alone. The very people who used to destroy it are now the ones building it up. This year, 2 of the most notorious copper thieves in the neighborhood turned their lives around and joined the work. Ironically, they are now working to put all the electrical wires back into our buildings.
Before coming to UFG, one of my biggest, we used to call them hustles, one of my biggest things for income was actually breaking into vacant houses and taking out the electrical wire, because copper's very lucrative at the scrap yards.
6 months ago, if you were to have described me to people, the most appropriate way to describe me would have been the most notorious metal scrapper on the block. There's many houses right now that are bare because of me.
One of UFG's associates is remodeling a house that me and my buddy stripped of all the and let all of the wiring, the tubs, we destroyed it. And he's been giving us an opportunity to go back in and help revitalize it and bring it back.
Can it be done? The answer is yes. It's always been yes. Yes, because it's the very heart of God. Life will emerge right out of the cracks in the asphalt if you let it. These last 3 years have been the most beautiful, painful, wild, and redemptive years we've ever experienced. We got in way over our heads, and we'll never go back. But the story has just begun. We are now entering phase 2. We are raising the stakes with these 2 impossible questions going forward. Question number 1. Can we empower others to grow $1 million in annual produce in Lycos and the surrounding 4 neighborhoods by 2020 and begin to build neighborhood economy and healthy food access? And question number 2, can we change the trajectory of at least 200 youth from Lycos neighborhood? We believe a sustainable community has the power to grab a hold of the imagination of the next generation and propel them forward into their destiny. Check this out. This spring, we made a ridiculous offer on a warehouse down the street for less than $30,000, and we got it. We own this 20,000 square foot building debt-free, and we're gonna build a dream. This summer, 20 architects in Kansas City came together pro bono to help us design this dream, the dream for the next generation. Create Space. Create Space is a place that brings the community together to learn, to make, to grow. It's a place where there's nothing you can't make. A 24/7 hub of invention, inspiration, incubation, and mentorship. It's the laboratory that we never had growing up. Everything from robotics to welding, aquaponic gardening, woodworking to electronics, Photoshop to music, sewing to artwork, and a future commercial kitchen in the entire backside to help incubate locally grown value-added food businesses. Tools for absolutely everything, nightly classes on everything from entrepreneurship to market farming, from welding certification to beekeeping. A place where any skill can be learned hands-on. But here's the magic. Create Space brings together many genius. Makerspaces all over the world are drawing talent and skills out of the woodwork. Many geniuses who, given the tools, the sky is the limit. There are hundreds of people in your city who don't have $500,000 to spend on tools, but they'd gladly spend $50 a month to be a part of a makerspace that does. A financially self-sustaining makerspace buzzing with multiple disciplines. Bam! We have just multiplied our mentorship pool for the youth of Lycans neighborhood. We scholarship 200 kids from Lycans and expand our programs, and I promise you there will be kids coming out of Lycans with super skills and mentors they desperately need. This is what we're already doing on a small scale. We're just about to blow it out of the water. Right now, we're asking for your help to get the word out. Several donors have already come together and pledged to donate $31,000 of matching funds to kick this off. If we can raise $31,000 this month, every donation will be doubled. Every $10 counts. To launch Create Space, we need to raise $200,000 to be fully sustainable and operational. We'll seek an additional $200,000 in funds or equipment over time to fully take advantage of the space.
So this is going to be several social policies coming together. These guys write grants to different agencies to be able to fund this. One might be to USDA for like a food production grant. Others maybe for education grant, social work grant. And so you're reminding me some of the other policies we have in the Midwest. I can't remember how many of you guys are from the Midwest, but we got about 500 million in grants available for the opioid addiction epidemic. So a lot of those can be found on grants.gov. And yeah, some of the social workers or IT people looking up different funding opportunities. I don't know how to spell opioid. Anybody know how to spell opioid? Opiates? I'll just do addiction grants. So if you do a search, you'll find a few Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act. That's one of the policies for the local drug crisis grants. If you clicked on that and say you did your internship, you can apply for $50,000, which for a social worker is a good salary. And, you know, working on different grants that would help with the opioid epidemic, which is kind of taken over. You also have, well, yeah, this one is for medication assisted. There's opioid, OPIOID. So this is probably for methadone, but some methadone clinics that people are beginning to open up policies to end the heroin addiction. That's another grant that you could apply for. And grants.gov usually has the large list of some of how the money makes its way from Congress to a policy that was passed, like the coronavirus policy, to like action, and then to treatment, like in the streets. Like at Lighthouse, we just applied for, I think it was $500,000 to end homelessness by the end of 2020. They also have a few grants that are research grants. So if you're doing research in your area of expertise, but this is kind of how like the policies, you wonder where that $1.9 trillion is going to go from Nancy Pelosi and Congress, how does it make it to the streets? This is one of the ways that you apply for it. So ideally to end poverty. So in chapter 8, they kind of cover policy on poverty and some of the policies and rules that we've put out to help that. Income and wealth inequality. Here it talks about the Gini coefficient measures the degree of inequality. And that's like how many millionaires do we have in the US, and then how many people do we have below the poverty line in the US? Has it grown with more millionaires over the past 5 years, or have we gotten more people below the poverty line in the past 5 years? Which one do you think has increased if you guys were to think about it? More people in poverty or more millionaires? Take a guess at it. I don't know how to even like kind of delineate the search terms. But yeah, I think especially since COVID with the 40 million layoffs, I mean, we only have 300 some million in the US. So that's 10% of the population. I think we only have about 100 million jobs. So if 40 million were laid off, that's like 40% of all the jobs dumped. Well, hopefully this is a quick click. 6 facts on economic inequality in the US. So we have, over the past 50 years, the highest earning 20% of the US households have steadily brought a larger share of the country's total income. I feel like this is what I was trying to articulate to you at first. But yes, there are more in poverty, especially since COVID. Stat number 2, income inequality in the US is the highest of all G7 nations. So even Italy, the United Kingdom, Japan, Canada, Germany, and France, we have pretty bad inequality. The black-white income gap in the US has persisted over time. Overall, 61% of Americans say there is too much economic inequality in the country today, but views differ by political party and household income. So Democrats are nearly twice as likely as Republicans to say there's too much economic inequality. The 5th one is that the wealth gap between America's richest and poor families more than doubled from 89 to 2016. So yeah, it looks like your answer is right, that the wealth gap between America's richest and poorest has doubled in the past, say, 25 years. And here's some of the stats to back it up. And the last one is that the middle class incomes have grown at a slower rate than upper tier incomes over the last 5 decades. So anybody know what the average household income is in the United States? Like, what do most people make? If you do a global stat, it's even more shocking. If you make over $31,000 a year, which is $15 an hour, that's what we want to raise our minimum wage to. Only 1% of the world population makes over $15 an hour. So like 99% of the others are, they say, actually less than about $2 a day. So that's why we are having more of this policy passed. I had something I pulled up for you guys about Pelosi and also economic policy in general. Where is the Pelosi one? Here it is. All right, so this is, if you're writing your paper for Sunday on the coronavirus relief bill, this gives some stats and figures that I had looked up for you. Commercial first, I think. Dear Lord, can't you skip it?
With the liquidity leaders, get DIA, the only ETF that tracks it down.
I have no idea what that's advertising. Anybody? ETF, is that electronic funds?
I had one shift where I saw about 84 patients.
The first 21 days, we had to work consecutively without an off day, between 12, 13 hours shift?
I did 7 days in a row of 12-hour shifts in the ICU. That's all COVID patients. That's definitely a huge shift from my usual world of gastroenterology.
So I was the first faculty doing that COVID week. All of our patients ended up being COVID-19 positive. Some of those patients ended up, passing away unfortunately, but we have to keep on moving.
I've been working as a primary care doctor over the last 4 years now. This is certainly the wildest thing any of us has seen.
Typically, we see very diverse racially and socioeconomically patient population. And it was interesting because I mentioned to our staff a few weeks ago, I said, do you notice that more of our patients coming in, they look like us? And everyone said, oh, absolutely.
Historically, African Americans and other minorities such as Hispanics have disproportionate numbers of hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol. These things are hard and challenging to manage on their own. They also weaken the immune system and weaken the ability to heal.
Unfortunately, those diseases tend to track with structural and systemic factors around the country, and those include lower income, lower rates of employment, lower rates of access to insurance.
When you put like a crisis on top of a crisis, these communities are going to do the most poorly. The patients that I noticed that didn't do too well, they were actually the patients who were obese, who had a BMI, a body mass index greater than 30, 35. Those were the patients that we saw who needed the ventilators, they needed machines to help them breathe.
Diabetes is unfortunately 60% more common in African Americans than in our white counterparts. The risk of diabetes is higher due to issues around diet, due to issues around treatment of other chronic conditions that worsen diabetes, such as obesity.
Really getting through to people of color, especially elders, in regard to their diet is definitely challenging. They grew up eating the scraps of food, the portions of food high in salt, high in fat.
I know from growing up in Detroit in a low-income family that when you have to feed your family, buying fresh fruits and vegetables is not necessarily affordable. And so if you're turning to these calorie-dense foods, you'll get your family fed. Unfortunately, what comes with that, though, is obesity and diabetes and high blood pressure.
Food deserts really influence the way people eat. If you don't have access to green vegetables.
Have you guys heard of food deserts before?
Unfortunately, you're going to be.
Did I show a video in here about food deserts? Okay. So I lived in a food desert in Kennedy Heights in Cincinnati. There's a lot in every major city. So if you don't have a grocery store within a mile to a mile and a half, that's considered a food desert.
More likely to buy the chips, the soda, the processed foods that increase one's rates of diabetes.
We started seeing more Black and brown patients over the last few weeks, and some of them were essential workers. They didn't have the luxury of working from home, and we saw less white patients or patients that could work remotely from home. It was, as I said, incredibly striking.
Right now, we know that there are still states, for example, that did not expand Medicaid to be able to ensure that the lowest income Americans, who unfortunately in our society tend to be from Black and brown backgrounds, have access to insurance. We know there are about 27 million uninsured in the country right now, and a much higher proportion of those individuals are Black and Hispanic.
We've had a number of patients come into our urgent care at the front desk and asking if, how much they will have to pay, how much do they have for the visit, how much do they have to pay if they were to get testing. So these are real concerns and absolutely a barrier, especially for people who are undocumented and who don't have insurance.
Many people don't know how to advocate their health because maybe they've not had the resources or they're not comfortable going to the doctor. So yes, you see that they'll show up when things are so bad, or they're knocking, on death's door, for lack of better words.
Workforce diversity, we know, is one of the solutions to addressing racial healthcare disparities. And the fact is that especially among physicians and nurses and other healthcare professionals. Our numbers are quite low when you compare our numbers in the US population.
So if you were to ask me, overall, is it diverse here in terms of the physician population? I'd say to a degree, in terms of diverse, in terms of a large number of underrepresented minorities, I would say no. Me, I'm the first African-American advanced endoscopy fellow here, period, and it's, I started this fellowship in 2019, we're 2020 now, and to say that I'm the first African-American advanced endoscopy fellow here is really mind-blowing. Yale does an excellent job of really trying to, recruit minorities. It's just, it's a slow process.
When you're in the healthcare setting, it's already a scary and trying time to begin with. When you don't see anyone that looks like you, that can be more concerning.
So I've definitely seen that, time and time again, where patients are just so excited to see another Black doctor, and actually, they will go out of their way to find a Black doctor. It's when you go into the room and then you say, I'm Dr. Campbell, you just see a lot of times their face just lights up with this pride, and it's like, wow, I'm just really happy to see you here as a physician.
I think it makes all the difference when you can see someone who looks like you. The patients are just, as you can imagine, more receptive to what you're saying. I feel that there's even a sense of ease or calm that might not be there otherwise.
Growing up, it was quite normal for me to see loved ones and families and friends dying in their 40s and 50s and thinking that was normal. As I got older and went off to college and so forth, I came to realize that no, that's not normal. Those are disparities and they're avoidable.
People who've been doing this work, we knew that these disparities existed, and we knew that this pandemic would only worsen or even just expose these inequities. And so what I'm hoping is that, that this horrible time, this basically nightmare that we're in, actually something good comes out of it, and that good would be for public health officials, for government officials to really think about how we can prevent this from happening in the future.
So that policy that's mainly covered here is what was passed in 2011 as the Affordable Care Act. So if you're writing on Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, and the way that they're trying to push policy to get out health care and health insurance to, I think back then we had like 80 million uninsured Americans. That was a huge, it's been a decade that we've had the Affordable Care Act. Now with Biden Care, I think yesterday passed a bill that they're going to get 200 million masks into different places that social workers are, where food deserts are. So in the food pantries of those food deserts and places of that nature. So again, if you chose policy on healthcare, I would kind of stick to the Affordable Care Act and what that bill did for folks to get insurance and to even get a social worker in the past 10 years. It's funded a lot. Here's the update on yesterday about what's going on with this new COVID bill. So they're trying to get us all another round of $1,400 checks, everybody who paid taxes last year. Not sure if that's going to have to make it both through the House and the Senate.
Homeowners, this incredible tip is just for you. If you owe less than $331,000,
Thank you. Okay.
The House Rules Committee on Wednesday released a new text of the COVID-19 relief bill, adding spending measures that far exceed the $1.9 trillion price tag planned for the bill. The full House is expected to vote on the COVID-19 relief package on Friday, but the bill will need to be changed to hit the $1.9 trillion limit to move through the Senate under special budgetary rules that are being used to avoid a Senate filibuster. Bloomberg reported that the rules measure includes spending on foreign aid, tribal assistance, and the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that will raise the price well above $1.9 trillion.
So they are going to have a
Right now,
large
safely accessing energy on federal.
large COVID relief bill. They're not sure if this 2 trillion is going to pass. They keep debating. They had it at one point at 2.7 trillion. Somebody got it down to 1.1 trillion. They go back and forth in the House and Senate. So they're going to vote on Friday to end this pandemic and deliver urgently needed relief to American families and small businesses. The American people strongly support this bill and moving swiftly to see if it's enacted in law. So I think in the House of Representatives, we have like 550 people voting. So it does have to pass with at least 226. In the Senate, obviously, every state has 2 senators. There's only 100. So 51 will pass the bill there. That's kind of what's going on with the bill. Here's the counter argument to it. This will be the other side that says, no, we only need $1 trillion. You'll see debate back and forth forever.
$1.9 trillion COVID relief bill by the end of the week, without the help of Republicans. Joining us now with more on this in the state of the GOP, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Leader McCarthy, it's good to see a big piece in the probably, I don't know if you read it yet, in the Wall Street Journal op-ed page. It's from Senator Romney, Mitt Romney. I mean, when you lose Romney with the Democrat, when you lose Romney, I mean, so there must be something wrong with it. The Biden stimulus bill is a $1.9 trillion clunker. He makes a lot of points here, one of which is that $700 billion wouldn't even be spent until after the end of this year, wouldn't be spent until 2022 or after. So how is that immediately fighting COVID? Is his point.
Well, it's not fighting COVID because only 9% of this bill goes towards COVID. So it's testing, vaccines, or others. 1.7 trillion is for everything. I mean, think for a moment. This is what the problem lies. We've done 5 COVID bills, bipartisan. This is the first one that the Democrats just want to do by themselves. And to get the votes, what do? They prime finance flows $100 billion for Silicon Valley failed rail project, or a bridge for Schumer. We're watching that the money that's going for schools aren't even being spent. 95% of it won't be spent this year. So will schools even open? You've got more than $60 billion sitting there for schools that are already.
So I guess you guys get the point. On some of those bills, they throw a lot of extra pork into it, is what they call it, like stuff that's not even related to coronavirus. If only 10% of that $2 trillion is going to COVID, I mean, that's still $200 million, I think, if I'm quoting that correctly, because I think $1 trillion is $1,000 million. So that's still $200 million. Or no, I'm sorry, $200 billion, because $1 trillion is after $1 billion, not $1 million. So it starts getting confusing after a while. But to kind of recenter us and get us back to the policy and the income inequality and poverty, which is what we're trying to fight in the first place. So on income and wealth inequality, income is the amount of money received in any 1 year before taxes. So that's, when I was your all's age, I tried to work 20 hours a week, but when I took 18 credit hours, it was tough. Usually they say your grades start going down if you work more than 20 hours a week, like if you do 25 and you're taking 15 or 18 credit hours, it sucks. There's no time to even hang out with friends. But back then, I usually got an income tax return. I didn't have to pay taxes because I made less than, if you make less than about $15,000 to $25,000, you usually get a tax return, not owing taxes. Wealth is property and assets that have market value and can be exchanged for money or goods. So that could be your car, your house, other things that are considered money or goods. Even at our food pantry, we had a sign for a while. If you're, you take the food, we want it to get to folks who actually need the food. If they were on the property trading the food they had gotten for something else, they weren't supposed to come back to the food pantry, if that makes sense. So some of the causes of rising inequality factors are like the technological revolution, like all of the computers are taking our jobs. How many of you guys do the self-checkout at Walmart? Because I do it a lot. Sometimes it's faster, but it took away a job from that cashier. You know what I mean? Like we don't need as many cashiers. So the technological revolution, globalization is a big one. So it's cheaper to make cars in Mexico than it is in Detroit. So we stopped making cars in Detroit because it costs $15 to $25 an hour. If you send that plant down to Mexico, it's like $3.50 an hour. It's a lot less to make it. In China, it's only $2 an hour to make cars. So we've pushed a lot of our businesses to other countries where they live off of less. Some public policy changes, a restructured workforce. We've also shifted from a goods producing industry to services, and then also decreasing percentages of employees represented by unions. Actually, we have a teachers union here that I belong to. We're like some of the last unions that are left because some of the car unions are gone. Is Detroit? How many car manufacturers are still in Detroit or like around? I feel like they left you guys, right? Any Detroitians? I think they all left. Not totally sure about that, but there's a few videos about that one. So to get back to social policy, this was the best, most specific, quick 8-minute video I found on the social policy stuff.
Hello, I'm Craig, and this is Crash Course Government and Politics, and today we're going to talk about social policy. I have a lot of social policies, which include not staying up past 3 a.m. on weeknights and avoiding social gatherings where Velveeta sausage cheese dip is served. Both of these are pretty listening for stuff. Actually, we're talking about government social policy, which deals with things like social security, education, and healthcare. And hopefully Velveeta sausage cheese dip, but probably not. In talking about policy, it's really hard to separate social policy or foreign policy from economic policy, primarily because they're all paid for with money. One way to distinguish between them is to look at a policy's goals. Social policy has a number of goals, none of which is the outright promotion of socialism. Glad that's out of the way, and no one's going to comment on it at all in the comments. Please honor. In America, social policy consists of programs that seek to do at least 3 things. Some social programs protect against risk and insecurity, like from job loss, health problems, or disability. Other social programs seek to promote equal opportunity. Finally, some social programs attempt to assist the poor. Of these 3 goals, there's general agreement that promoting equal opportunity is a good thing, less agreement on whether the government should protect us from risk, and widespread skepticism about helping the poor. Americans traditionally haven't cared much for social policy, and part of the reason for this has to do with Americans' strong faith in individualism that's suspicious of government action, and generally favors private charity and pull yourself up by your bootstraps self-reliance. I don't think I've ever worn bootstraps, Stan. Does that make me a true American? As you might have guessed, the history of the American government's social policy pretty much starts, as most government programs do, with the New Deal. Prior to the 1930s, there were some attempts on the state level to protect workers and limit exploitation, but often these were struck down by the courts, and the federal government's role in protecting people from risk was minimal. The government did provide pensions to veterans' widows, but except for a relatively brief period after the Civil War, the numbers of pension recipients were never very large. The Great Depression changed the way that Americans came to view their government, and also modified how many of them felt about poverty. The suffering caused by the Depression was so great and so widespread that many Americans came to feel that it was part of the government's job to do something about it. Private charities, which had been the primary way that Americans had helped the poor before the Depression, could not handle the numbers of needy people. In addition, not all these people could be considered to have become poor due to their own personal failings. The Great Depression helped solidify the idea that people could sometimes be victims of economic forces beyond their control, and that it was the government's duty to help them. Basically, the Great Depression changed people's question from if the government should help to how should the government help. The answer to that question came in the form of the New Deal. You've probably heard about the New Deal. It's a big deal, but we've only got 12 minutes, so we're going to focus on 2 specific programs: Social Security and Aid to Families with Dependent Children, or AFDC. And if you judge by public opinion polls, and who doesn't, then Social Security is one of the most successful New Deal programs ever. Let's go to the thought bubble. Started in 1935, the Social Security Act was a reaction to the fact that many elderly people in the U.S. were poor, largely because they had no work, little savings, and no pensions. Social Security provided monthly payments to people age 65. Although it was being rich, it was enough money to prevent people from falling into abject poverty. A couple of things about Social Security. First, it's not a savings program. You pay into it when you're working, but that money doesn't go to an account for you to access when you retire. So how does it work? Well, when you're working and on a payroll, taxes are deducted from your wages, and the amount is matched by your employer. The total amount that gets taken out is 7.65%, with 6.2% going to Social Security, and the other 1.45% going to Medicare, which provides health coverage for older people. This money goes into a pot, which is then paid out to people over the age of 65. In other words, today's workers are paying today's older Americans. The benefits are indexed, which means that they go up with inflation. This program redistributes wealth from younger working people to older retired people. Because the more you make, the more you pay, at least up to a point, because there's a cap on the amount of your salary that's subject to the payroll tax. Social Security also redistributes wealth from richer people to poorer ones. In general, Americans are suspicious of programs that redistribute wealth, but Social Security is very popular with both liberals and conservatives. Conservatives tend to like it because it's funded by a regressive payroll tax that phases out at higher incomes, rather than a more progressive one that hits higher earners harder. Liberals like it because it provides automatic benefits for the elderly. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Whether Social Security is in crisis depends a lot on what numbers you look at and whether you believe that there are political solutions to potential problems. The number of people receiving benefits is rising. Approximately 50 million Americans receive Social Security, and that number is increasing as baby boomers get older, and the number of people paying into it is falling. Eventually, if these trends continue, there will come a time when there might not be enough money paid into Social Security to pay out benefits to those who qualify. This shouldn't be an issue since Social Security spending is controlled by congressional legislation, and they can always raise the payroll tax or raise the benefit age above 65. It should be easy, uncontroversial. Since older people tend to vote, there's a strong incentive for Congress to fix any problems and keep the benefits coming. Also, it would be a national embarrassment for Congress to let it go bankrupt. Medicare, which is also paid for by payroll taxes, is probably in more trouble, partly because of the same demographics that are putting pressure on Social Security, but mainly because of rising medical costs, which Medicare can only do so much to control. Medicare is a third-party payer for its medical benefits. It doesn't actually provide doctors or medicine or stuff that makes people healthy. Since it does cover more than 45 million Americans, Medicare has some leverage over costs, but at least until recently, those costs have been rising rapidly. Social Security is generally popular, but I'll tell you what was unpopular: aid to families with dependent children. In fact, it was so unpopular, we don't even have it anymore. Like, imagine this eagle as the AFDC. Metaphor. AFDC is what Americans tend to think of when we talk about welfare. It was a system that paid benefits to women and children, and the amount of the payments went up or down depending on how many children you had. AFDC is what is called a non-contributory program, which means what it sounds like. You didn't need to have contributed through taxes to be eligible or to receive benefits. There are still some non-contributory social welfare programs, most notably free school lunches, federal housing assistance programs, and supplemental nutrition assistance programs, also known as SNAP or food stamps. Another is the successor to AFDC, Temporary Aid to Needy Families, or TANF, or TANF. In the 1980s, conservatives argued that these AFDC checks created dependency, or at the very least, an incentive to not work, and increasing welfare payments were pointed to as a criticism of liberalism in general. But conservatives weren't able to reform welfare in the 80s because even though a majority of Americans didn't like it, passing laws is difficult, especially when Congress is hostile to you. It took a Democratic president, Bill Clinton, to push welfare reform through Congress, which in 1996 passed the Personal Responsibility and Opportunity Reconciliation Act, better known as the 1996 Welfare Reform Act. This law got rid of aid to families with dependent children and replaced it with temporary aid to needy families, which emphasized that any aid to needy families was going to be temporary, by putting that as the first word in its title. There are now work restrictions that recipients must meet in order to get benefits, and there are time restrictions. You can only receive benefits for 2 years in a row and 5 years total. All of this was supposed to encourage people to get off welfare, and as the name of the law tells us, exercise greater personal responsibility. So did it work? It kind of worked. The number of people receiving welfare did decrease, and more people did look for and find work. On the other hand, the law didn't reduce poverty, although to be fair, that wasn't what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to reduce welfare. Also, during economic downturns, as in 2001 and 2009, welfare caseloads rose again, suggesting that the work that people did find might not be such a stable solution to relieving poverty. So this episode is focused mainly on the more controversial aspects of social policy, those that involve redistribution of wealth from richer to poorer Americans. And I'm sure all of you commenters are fine. Actually, probably not. For a lot of reasons, some economic, but many cultural, Americans have generally been suspicious of these redistributive programs. Remember that I said one goal of social policy, one that's not very controversial, is increasing opportunity. And for most of us, the key to increasing opportunity is education, which is what we're doing right here. Education is one social policy that almost everyone agrees on, under the theory that if everyone's educated, they'll be able to find good, high-paying jobs that will enable them to achieve greater economic stability and mitigate the risks in their own lives without the government having to do it for them. Whether it works or not, and just how much the government should be involved, are questions that you will have to think about and argue over with your friends, and families, and teachers, and teachers' teachers, and teachers' grandmas, and the guy at McDonald's, maybe the guy standing next to you at the Velveeta sausage cheese dip platter. But it's important to remember that social policy isn't just redistribution of wealth or income. It's also education and programs that help people who really can't help themselves. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Crash Course Government Politics is produced in association with CBS Digital Studios. Support for Crash Course.
So I thought that was a good, succinct description of what we're going over in this class. Just that social policy isn't all handouts. In a lot of cases, it is actually education and finding ways to empower one another to empower ourselves, and finding different ways to lose that income inequality gap. So, any questions about, especially the paper due Sunday, because I feel like this is the last time we meet until Sunday. So this will be like your magic time to ask whatever you want about it, or have me look something up for you, or find you some articles for what you want to write about, or how you're going to do your presentation if you're doing that on the first paper, or doing your presentation on the second paper.
So that graphic part is only for the presentation?
Right, yes. Yeah. So the presentation, which we used to have 2 in the syllabus because we have so many who took this class this semester. There's like a whole online section and a whole in-person section. So it's like 80 people. I'm just having you do one presentation. You'll put your graphics into that. If you choose for the second paper, here's what that one's about, which is called your social justice topic paper and presentation. It's no longer a group paper because we are in coronavirus. We don't do anything in groups anymore. Sorry. If you got any of you guys like group work by chance? Anybody like that? I feel like most people hate doing group projects. If you like it, that's okay. You can let me know. But I took away the group part as just a second paper on child labor, access to clean water, food, shelter, human dignity, how poverty affects human rights. So if you'd prefer to do your presentation on that stuff, you are more than welcome to. You just start presenting anytime in March or April, like there's that sign up. So you're going to sign up a day that you pick that you want to give your presentation to the class. If you'd prefer to get it out of the way and do it right here, you can do that too. So just make sure to cover your 4 pages. That doesn't include the top, which is just like a title page that'll have like your name and date and university, and it doesn't include the reference page. So it would look like 6 pages, but it's 4 pages of content, APA style, so like American Psychological Association, 12-point font. If you want a trick to make, a 3-page paper into a 4-page paper, write it in Courier New font because it makes it's still 12-point. It just spaces everything out accordingly. You guys ever use the Courier New font in here? I'll show you it. Most teachers don't let you do it, but I'm okay. If you're really struggling, you should have plenty of info, but if you're really struggling to get that info and say how do you select all? Any guess? Edit. Select all. So here is, that's all Times New Roman font, but if say you are really struggling to stretch it out, here's your trick. You take Times New Roman, it's still 12-point, COURIER, new. Most teachers get really pissed when you do this, so don't tell your other teachers. See how it's all the same spacing, like the I and the L and the O is all the same. But then if you go back to Times New Roman, it's like the L is just like that, and the O and the. I prefer Courier New. It's easier for me to read. So if you're really struggling, want to stretch out your papers, that's how you do it. That was always the trick we knew in college, but maybe you guys don't do stuff like that anymore. You're like of high integrity and type everything at the length it's supposed to be. And we weren't. We'd be like, man, I'm sick of writing this damn 4-page paper. How can I turn 3 into 4? Boom. That's how you do it right there. Courier New font. So if you don't want to, you don't have to do that. It's just easier for me to read it that way. Times New Roman works. Any other questions? Y'all have to remind me about your majors again. What's yours? Oh yeah. What all do they have in that? I've actually been curious. Like, do you get a nutrition degree there too, or do they make you take diet stuff, or what classes have you taken so far? Do they make you like run in class and crap? That would be crazy. Like, hey, do your 5 laps. Because I know we were supposed to add a nutrition degree with the exercise science one. You know who has good graduate programs in exercise science? I heard Miami University has like one, or Miami Middletown. So, what other majors? What's yours?
Criminal justice.
Oh, that's right. Okay. You criminal justice people are the ones that I try to talk into double majoring in social work, because you'll get a social work license if you finish with both. So think about it. You're psychology, right?
Yes.
Okay. What's yours again?
Social work.
Oh, yeah. All right. That's what I'm talking about. How many classes have you taken so far?
First semester only 2. Well, this semester I'm taking 5.
But like, how many? Okay, so how many social work classes are you at? 2 now, or you've done intro? So that's another good point. Make sure, which I'm sure they've already told you, as long as you guys do 5 classes every semester, you'll graduate on time. If you get behind, you can take 6 one semester or do a summer class, but it's cheapest to do like 5 or 6 every semester, because it's the same price to take 4 classes as it is to take 6 classes, which always kind of blew my mind. What's your major again? Is that in education? Okay, cool. You would be another one I'd be like, you should think about double majoring in social work. Think about it. You don't have to. Because it sounds like a lot of stuff we do in social work too. And then what's your major? All right, cool. Well, do you guys have any questions for me? You've got to have something.
It's not specifically about that. How late do you take like discussion boards?
I'm going to go ahead and open everything up. So if you're behind, you guys can catch up on all of that stuff. There's just like that 12 or 15% late fee or whatever, but I'll open them. You can do them and then reply to classmates. You can still get your credit and do okay. So if you're behind, everything will be opened up so you can get it done. Pass this class with flying colors and get through the semester. We're like freaking March on Monday. Did you know that? And I feel like we're done in April, really. I mean, I know it's the first week of May, but April is like our last full month of classes. So we've already done January. February's over in like 30 seconds for this class. And then, yeah, so one more full month. I'll open everything up. Never shy away from turning in a late assignment. I want you guys to pass and do well and learn all the material, learn everything that you need to do well and succeed. Class of 2023, everybody? Are you guys all 20? What are you? 24. Okay. So 1 freshman and 5 sophomores?
I'm a freshman too.
Are you? Okay.
I am too.
All right, cool. Well, good. I will say, as much as I hate the online classes and all that stuff, at least we still can like do education now. Like they didn't just like shut down school and colleges and all that stuff, because that would make me feel real depressed for the future. But that's all I have for you guys. Do you remember which font you want to write it in if you don't feel like writing 4 pages? Corey, you're new. Don't tell your other teachers, because they'll get real pissed off at me. Actually, our APA style, we used to have a template and it showed you how to write an APA and you'd like upload. It was always in Courier New, and that's how I found out it was longer. And I turned it in once and some teachers like, no, I said Times New Roman font. I don't care if it's Times New Roman font. I really do think Courier New is easier to read because it's like spread. It's like a typewriter, you know, them old typewriters that are like, I like it. Well, cool. That is all I have for today. I'm trying to get ready for my nighttime class. So you all have a good weekend. Do the paper